Welcome back to the channel, guys, and today's video is all about player traits, which ones I would recommend and which ones you guys might want to use inside your tactics. Before we get started in the video though, please hit the subscribe button on the channel. This year we'll be making FM24 content about every single area of the game, and it's all going to be informational, so hopefully you guys pick things up. Let's do it. So first things first, what is a trait? A trait is part of a player's personality, or if you want an official Oxford definition, it is a distinguishing quality or characteristic, typically one belonging to a person. Player traits have a much bigger impact than any of people imagine on each save game. They are the difference between a player cutting inside or going down the wing. Even if you guys have set a player to do things, their player traits will override that often and they will do the opposite, because you're asking the guy to be a winger, but on his player traits he has cuts inside with ball. He's likely going to cut inside with the ball because it's a trait of his, it's in his DNA, it's in his person. He's been doing that since he was a kid, so it's very, very hard to overrule that. So if you guys don't like a trait, or you think someone might be doing something that's harming your tactical structure, then you have to unlearn that trait. On the flip side of that, you can also refine your tactics to give them the extra edge. If you want a player to do things that role inside the game doesn't allow you to do, you can add the trait on and it will also give you a bit of an extra edge inside that role. So for example, if you guys want to use a high pressing system that gets into a lot of tackles and like a bit of a gegenpress Klopp type, you might want to give your midfielders and your strikers dives into tackles. Now that doesn't mean you might get a few extra more yellow cards and maybe a few more red cards. You might not, depending on how dirty a player is, which is obviously a hidden attribute that you guys can't see. But if we're just talking about player traits, diving into tackles is just going to make sure that they go into more tackles than they don't. So if you guys, like I said, want to press up high and you want to see your players try to win the ball early and high up the pitch, then dives into tackles for your front men might be a really good thing to train. So I'm going to highlight this guy here, Gianluca Di Chiara, and he's my backup left back. He's a really good player. He performs way above his attributes because of his traits. So he's got a lot of them. If we go into his development tab, we can see he has runs with ball down left, which he's got quite good dribbling, so that's really good. Gets into opposition area, and he's got good off the ball. Obviously, there's other things to do with this, like decision making and stuff like that. But I'm just going to give you sort of the basic at the start, and then I'm going to sort of go into it a bit more in depth at the end. He has plays 1-2s, which is really nice for a left back. He likes to beat opponents repeatedly. He's got good pace to do that. And he likes to switch ball to wide areas, which is a bit of a bonus. He's got 13 passing, and if he's under a bit of trouble and the opposition have pressed over his side, he does sometimes switch it over to the right back, which is really nice and releases a lot of pressure. So, if we look at his attributes, he's okay. He's nothing special. He's physically quite good, so you guys might be like, oh, it's his physicals that's helping him. And yes, they are helping him, but it's his traits that are making him perform the way he does. So if we look, my left fullback in my system is really, really needs to be energetic. He needs to have good stamina. And I often sub out my first left back in the 60th minute, 65th minute. And this guy comes on. As we can see, he's got 5 substitute appearances, only 1 start, but he's got 3 assists in that time. And he's got an average rating in Serie A of 7.53. In the Coppa Italia, we've played a team in Serie B and Serie A. So not too bad. 1 easier game, 1 quite tough game. He's got 1 start and 1 sub, 2 goals, 1 assist. 8.1 rating, and obviously in the friendlies, we'll not count them because they were against lower league opposition. But basically, this is a very, very, very consistent player and way overperforms his attributes because of his traits. He often gets into the opposition area, that's how he's scored the goals, and he's always looking to get forward, runs with the ball down the left. He does play a lot of 1-2s with my left defensive midfielder, and he also likes to switch ball to wide areas. So again, doesn't really matter that one. It's just a bit of a bonus to release a bit of pressure. But the top 5 are really, 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 really good for a left back. And obviously for the right back, they're really good, but obviously you want runs with ball down right. Now, I did a video on traits last year that did really well, so I thought I'll do it again this year. And what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to go through the traits that you guys can learn and tell you if I would recommend them, when I would do them, and an example of how you might get the best out of it, right? Because I was sat here wondering how to structure this video, and I thought, well, why don't I just sort of give an example of a player that's good for me that uses them, and also just go through them one by one almost, and then just tell you each and every one of them, tell you about each and every one of them. Right? That seems like it makes the most sense. If I miss anything in this video though, please put it in the comment section after you've subscribed, obviously, and I will get back to every single one and I will try and help, because it is an area of the game that this video could, if I wanted it to, could end up being an hour long. I'm going to try and cut it down and chop it down. So what I should do in this video is tell you guys how to give a player a trait. So obviously if we go to the development tab and then we click discuss new trait, right? It sounds pretty obvious, but it's a little button and you guys might miss it or forget it's there. And then there's an option from each one of your coaches. Now, each coach has their speciality in brackets. So Robinson is defending, Natari set pieces, general, mental, defending, attacking. Now, if I sort of just let this open up, it has movement, passing, finishing, defending, technique. So, now I don't know this for 100% fact, but that must be in brackets for a reason. So, if I'm wanting to learn a defender, a defensive trait, then I think Paul Robinson, the defending coach, is probably going to have a higher chance of success of training a defensive trait. Now, I don't know that for a fact, so I'm not saying that's a definite thing, but with it not just listing your coaches, it actually lists what they're good at. It has to mean, surely you would think, that it would give a higher success rate if you pick those guys. It's never steered me wrong so far. The only other thing I would suggest, for example, if we go to Morris and we go to movement and then we go to Chiara, and then, I don't know, we want to knock balls past opponent, and he says he's too old for it to be worth trying to change things. Now, that might be different. This guy is 30, so he might be right. But if I still want to learn it, then I will do it, because I'm the gaffer. You guys are the gaffer, remember that. Don't always listen to your coaches. If he says something else, like he hasn't got the required skills for it or whatever, if you want him to have that trait, don't just trust his opinion like it says there. Just say, no, do you know what? No. I want you to train it. That's what you're going to do. And more often than not for me, it actually comes through successful, because like we said, we know more than the coaches. Don't just listen to everything they say. So on the flip side to giving a player a trait, we also might want to take one off if it's affecting your tactics or your structure, or it's just basically not doing him any good. So what we want to do for that is do the exact same thing, but this time it'll be worded differently. So for example, Chiara has runs with ball down left. Now that's a movement training one. So if we go here, we go back to Morris and we go movement. And then it says here, it just changes the wording. So it says here, I would like you to start coaching Gianluca to stop dribbling down the left flank as he currently does. Now, if he didn't have that trait, it would say, I want you to start coaching him to run down the left. So all it is, it's a little bit of like a text difference of, if he's already got the trait, it'll be worded different to if he hasn't got it. So just keep your eye out for that. It'll just have a different wording. Just give it a quick read. But it's the same way of putting a trait on as taking one off. And what will happen is, instead of it going green underneath, which is basically signaling that it's being trained, it will be red, which means it will be trying to get rid of it, right? You also might, at the bottom left-hand corner here under the training report, have like a little bit of like a text to say if a player is getting closer to finishing the trait, or if a player is not learning it quite enough well, and you might want to take it off, because what happens is it does take away time from development. So if you're wanting to give traits, I would either give them really early on when it doesn't really affect their ability to grow too much, or maybe when they've finished growing at maybe 21. It's totally up to you. There's not really the better way to do it. It's sort of preference. If you're looking at a guy that's probably going to be in your first team at 19 years old, you might want to give him a trait before that, so when he comes into your first team, he's playing the way you want him to play. So first things first, we're going to talk about goalkeepers and get it out of the way, because the goalkeeper traits are very, very limited. I think there's like 3 or 4. You can have, obviously, a passing training, which basically makes him start counter-attacks with long throws. So if a goalkeeper's got really good long throws, good decision-making maybe. And I think strength also comes into throwing. If a goalkeeper's got higher strength, I think they can throw it for longer. I'm pretty certain that's the thing. Whenever sometimes you press continue on the game, the little tips come up at the bottom, the hints and tips. And I'm pretty sure I've seen that strength allows goalkeepers to throw it longer, which makes total sense, right? So you don't think about that, but it does. So if a goalkeeper's got good throwing, good strength, and maybe good decision making, because you want him to make the right decision. Decision making comes into almost every single trait, by the way, because decision making is probably, for me, in my opinion, if this is subjective, but for me, it's the most important stat of the entire game of just Football Manager in general and football in general. The best decision makers are the best football players. You're talking De Bruyne's, you're talking Messi's, you're talking Modric. Those decision makers at the top of the game are the best players, because every single thing about football is a decision. Every single thing you do is a decision, whether you're wanting to, do I decide to run up the pitch this time? Do I decide to stay back because we've got too many people forward? Everything is a decision. Just think about it for a second. literally every phase of play and every pass is a decision. Every chance to run somewhere is a decision. Every chance is whether you want to go into a tackle is a decision, go for a header, not go for a header, do I close it down, do I not? Everything is a decision. So everything I talk about in this video, decision making is central to it, because it is the stat for me that is one of the most important, no, it's the most important in my opinion on Football Manager. So I always like to fill my teams up with good decision makers, and I do quite well on FM, and I'm not going to change that because I don't want to break it, but I just want to say that before we get started into looking at all the traits, that is something that I might mention a lot because it is a big thing. So goalkeepers obviously gets crowd going. I don't think you can give a player that. I think that just comes with him, and you can mentor it through to other people, but this is a real player, so he comes with it, and it increases the likelihood of a player seeking a positive reaction from the crowd in appropriate moments when the ball is not in play. So, like, I don't know, maybe the other team gets given a penalty, and he's sort of like going to the crowd like, come on, and it puts the player off, and the goalkeeper might save it. For example, something like that. But you can't. When Nugents come into the game, because they're not real players, they won't come through with stuff like gets crowd going. They will only come through with ones that you can actually give to them in training. So passing training, like I said, is starting counter-attacks with long throws. You can do finishing training, which is just long-range free kicks. So there's also discipline training, because obviously if you want to get rid of that gets crowd going. But if you notice, that is discipline training. If I go to my other goalkeeper, which is Martin Turk, and I go to his traits, there won't be a discipline training, because you cannot give people that trait, right? It's just something that either a player has from the start of the game or doesn't have, and it can be mentored through or passed along to younger goalkeepers. But if we go back to Tobias, the last one you can give him is technique training, and it basically makes him avoid his weaker foot. So if you're wanting a goalkeeper that's playing out, you probably do want a guy that's good on both feet. But if he isn't, you might want to avoid that so he doesn't give away any stupid passes to the opposition. Right, so we go to defenders, and I'm going to start with Enrico Del Prato because he's the first one there. This guy's pretty good, to be honest. He's a very good defender. He's my inverted fullback at right back. He's good at defending. He's just a solid guy that, to be fair, I want him to cover inside when we attack. He's not really that good at going forward, but he's a very, very, very good player mentally. So I want him to stay back and just sort of cover when we attack. So if we go into his, like I said before in the start of the video with Chiara, those traits on my left back that I showed you are probably the best left back traits, especially runs with ball down left, knocks ball past opponents. That is so overpowered in the match engine. It just literally blitzes down the line. If you guys have ever noticed when you've played like Man City or PSG and they've got like Walker or Hakimi, they do that as well. They just push the ball past and they go past him. Obviously you need someone that's quick, someone that's good at dribbling, but it is very, very, very overpowered. If you are a top team and you want to get down the sides of teams, you want your fullback to be able to dribble with a ball. A lot of people I see sign like basically fullbacks and centre-backs at fullback. They won't do anything. They won't break down. If you want to use them to come inside like Del Prato, maybe that's fine. But if you want to sort of like get down their low blocks and like beat out the defensive systems, then you're probably going to need fullbacks to dribble and get behind to cut it across, because that's how Chiara gets all of his goal involvements, and he's very good at doing so. So, like I said, there's other things here, like if you want to hug the touchline, if you think your wing-back's not tight enough on the touchline, if you want him to be a bit wider, that's fine. You can make him cut inside from both wings if you really want to, not a problem. I don't know why you'd ever do that. If he's really good at dribbling, you might want to do that, but it seems quite dangerous to me. Runs with ball more often if you've got an exceptional dribbler. Maybe you've retrained a winger to go to wing back. That's absolutely fine. If you want him to never run with the ball, you can also do that, or just occasionally. Stay back at all times, which to be fair, I could learn to Del Prato. That would sort of cement him in his inverted fullback role. He would never ever get forward, and he would just stay back and form that back three. But yeah, there's not a million things that you can do with fullback. There's a lot you can do, but there's not a lot that changes their game massively, apart from the movement ones, really. Like shooting, for example. It doesn't matter if he places shots or shoots with power, because he's rarely going to shoot. If we're on the passing training, though, simple passing game, if a player's not very good at passing and you don't want him to lose the ball, some people like to put short passing game in possession systems to their youngsters, and then that basically means they won't waste the ball, etc. Makes total sense. So if I go through all these on Enrico Del Prato, then we're not going to cover him on other things. I'm just going to go through each trait, and then I'm going to say why you guys might want to use them and might not, and give you sort of a bit of a food for thought, right? I want you guys to come away from this video thinking about, oh, I could give this guy a trait because I want him to do this in a game, but he's not doing this. So, for example, if you're playing an advanced forward in your system, now, if you're playing an advanced forward in your system and it's a guy that likes to beat off side traps, he will play that role differently to a guy that comes deep to get the ball, right? So you can see that traits make players play differently, but in the same role, right? So all advanced forwards won't work the exact same unless they have the exact same traits or they both have no traits, right? So traits have a massive impact. So I just want to make you guys think about, oh, I could maybe actually make him do that because then he'll do this and that'll lead to that and it's all going to work together, right? I want you guys to start thinking about FM and playing it to a better degree, not a better degree, but a more in-depth degree, so you guys can get more immersion out of your save games and you can be like, oh, I gave him that trait and he did this and that's from me, and it gives you a sense of satisfaction, right, when you're playing Football Manager. So there's other things like you want to slow down the play. So obviously if you've got a guy, again, with good decision making, good passing, good vision, you want a guy that's going to slow the play down and draw teams onto them and then bang, through ball, right? Or a ball through the lines. That's very good if you've got a player, like I said before, like Modric or Toni Kroos or Xavi back in the day, or those guys, right? Slow the play down and they'll decide when it needs to be sped up. Start attempting long-range passes. I mean, that makes total sense if you want a guy to be playing long-range passes. So if he's got really good passing, technique, all of the good things like that, that's absolutely brilliant. Again, I'm going to stop mentioning it after this, but decision making, if you want them to make the long range pass or not, that's another good thing. This one here is one of my favourite ones, which is I would like to start coaching Enrico to start switching possession to the other side of the pitch. Now, this is amazing for defensive midfielders and central midfielders especially, and also it can be really good for centre-backs. So it's going to sound obvious of what it says, but I'm going to explain it a little bit further. I did it on last year's video, but I only sort of mentioned 5 or 6 traits that I thought was the best. But this year I'm going to sort of try and go through them all a bit quicker, but let you guys know how and when you should maybe use them and what you should look for in your players when deciding. So this one here, switch possession, is extremely overpowered in the match engine, because if a team's pressing you and they've got all their players sort of pressing in that one area, so think about when you're playing against like a Man City or a PSG or Bayern Munich, wherever you're playing, right, these big teams. If you've got a player in DM or centre-back, like I said, or midfield, where you've got this trait in, what you'll see happen is they'll get the ball from one side and then they'll literally instantly go to the other side if there's space. Now, it might sound really obvious, but if you watch a real game in real life, you actually might notice that some players, because they're not technically able to get the ball on the half turn and fire it out to the other side, what you'll notice is they'll receive the ball, the head will be down, and they can only play in this sort of like little blinkered vision circle, right? So they'll just go straight back to that guy under pressure, or they'll go to that guy and just sort of make the easy pass. And then you're under even more pressure because they're on you. But this trait is very, very useful, and I've used it a lot in my offline saves. I often forget in my stream saves because I'm sort of interacting with chat and things like that. But on my offline saves, when I'm sort of able to concentrate a little bit more on the game, I do like this trait. It's very, very, very highly recommended by me. And you will see a big difference. Maybe even sign a player with it and you'll see. Or even look for maybe one of your players already that has it. Very, very, very good. It switches out and gives you more space on this side to attack down the other side very quickly. This is a very underrated one too. I would like you to start coaching Enrico to want the ball into his feet more often. So if you don't want people spamming long balls into the channels because your winger isn't the fastest winger, you might want him to come in to get the ball to feet. Maybe like a Bernardo Silva on the wing, or Mahrez, or even Saka. They don't really go in behind that much, do they? Saka a bit more than the other two, but if you want a player to come into the feet because he's fantastic with his feet, right? Because he's got a great first touch, because he's got great technique, great agility, great balance, you might want him to come into to get the ball to feet, because if a player's marking him from behind, he can sort of just spin him and he's gone and he's inside and he's running at the defence and that guy's out of position, and then you're in. So giving players the opportunity to get the ball into their feet is really good, especially for a deep line forward as well. Really, really good. I know it sounds obvious, but they will literally just come into that space and ask for the ball to feet. They will never really think of Roberto Firmino, right? Makes sense that he'll come into the ball to feet and then he gets to play the ball around the corner. So you could also give that, you could couple that one with tries killer balls often, maybe if you've got a creative winger or a creative striker. Really clever together. They're really good working together. And then obviously cross the ball early whenever the opportunity arises. If you've got a really good crosser of the ball, yeah, you might want to get that on, right? A good striker with good movement, whip that in, bang, think about it. So they're the passing ones. Like I said, I'm not going to like zoom through them because I want to sort of give you guys good information. But this video might be a little bit longer than the other ones. I'm hoping I'm helping you out a little bit. But now we're going to go on to the finishing ones. And then there's long-range free kicks. That sort of just makes sense if you want a guy who's really good at free kick taking to smash them in from long range. Long shots, again, if you've got a guy with good long shots, good technique, get that in. Could be very overpowered. Very, very good, especially with... you can see players with low attributes in long-range shots. They will still often hit good long-range shots. So that just sort of makes them try it more often. And if they're good at it, why not, right? Accentuate every single strength in your squad. And traits are a very good way to do that. And then obviously there's try to lob the goalkeeper when one-on-one. So like good technique, good decision-making, good anticipation on strikers if they want, like, so they know when the goalkeeper's going to go down. But yeah, lob goalkeeper is very good as well. It just gives a striker an extra avenue to go down if they're through on goal, right? Oh, I can lob him. Bang. Go around the goalkeeper again. Good dribbling. Stuff like that. Good technique. Go around the goalkeeper. It's not really going round the goalkeeper on FM. It's more going to the side of the goalkeeper to get a better angle. So you might see players do that. Blast the ball into the back of the net. Now, you can use this both ways. So if a striker has very good technique and very good finishing and composure and all that stuff for a striker that needs this, it can, again, accentuate his accurate shots to make him more powerful, but it can also make them less precise because with more power comes less accuracy, right? But then on the other flip side, if a player's not very good at shooting, if he's already not good at shooting, what you might as well do is give him shoots with power, because when he does shoot, and if it is on target, it's probably going to go past the goalkeeper, right? So it's that's something to think about. Place his shots, again, if you've got high technique, high finishing, all that stuff like that. Again, like I said I wouldn't mention it, but I'm going to decision making, when to blast it, when to place it. Very, very good attributes for that trait. Place the shots is quite overpowered, to be honest. If you've got a guy that's really technical, it could maybe be the difference between him getting 30 goals and 40 or plus. So definitely have a think about that one. Rifle free kicks is just basically like free kicks with more power, right? Makes sense. So you could couple that one with the one at the top, which is long range free kicks. Obviously, if you've got James Ward-Prowse or someone like that. Consider overhead kicks. That's just a bit of a fun one, I guess, if you want to do that. And then obviously taking fewer long shots if a guy's not very good at long shots, right? That's also very good too. Next, we're going to talk about defending traits. And we're going to look at these three. So there's throwing himself into tackles, staying on his feet, and marking opponents tightly. Now, throwing yourself into tackles sounds really aggressive. And it does usually mean more fouls because they will try more tackles. But it's also something you can use if you're wanting to play a counter-attacking system, like I said at the start of this video. Because if you wanted to do a counter-attacking system, you want to win the ball in certain areas. So if you're playing a low block, you obviously want to draw them on. But then at some point, when they get into that area that you want to engage, you do want your players snapping into tackles because then they'll be ahead of the ball and you've got space to attack. So it's not a bad thing. Some people see dives into tackles and think, oh, red cards. That's not automatically the case. There is another attribute, like I mentioned, that's called dirtiness that you guys can't see. You sort of can see it if you go into report, and it's down here sometimes, and it says a competitive streak, which leads him to bending the rules. And you will see it down here. If it's dark red, that means he's a dirty player. If it's sort of like a light orange, he's a little bit dirty. But that isn't what is going to make that trait a bad thing. You're going to want to look at aggression. Even aggression says, this attribute does not necessarily reflect a player's dirtiness, but their willingness to get stuck in, perhaps at the expense of giving away more fouls. So with dives into tackles, you might see maybe more second yellow cards, potentially, so you might want to sub a player off, I don't know. But it's not always a bad thing, is what I'm trying to say to you, right? Keep it in mind. Don't just dismiss everything based on something that you have like a preconceived notion of. Think about it. Obviously, stay on feet if someone is not very good at marking or tackling. You might want to just stick in position. That's absolutely fine too. You might not want to press. You might just want to be fine in your position. Make sure he stands up and never dives in. Marking opponents tightly is very, 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 very good to put on a fullback, especially a physically good fullback, because they have the pace to get out to the player, and then even if he gets beaten, they have the pace to recover. Now, obviously, you want to couple that with good defensive attributes, but fast, physical fullbacks, that is very good to use because, like I said, they can just get back in and have another crack at it. A really, really good trait is, as a centre-back, you want to make them bring the ball out of defence. That is one of my highly recommended traits too. That is insanely important if you've got a guy that's good at dribbling, technique, even if he isn't as good at dribbling, because what happens there is a centre-back will dribble out with the ball and then someone from midfield will come and press him and that leaves the midfielder free. It sort of makes it's really good at playing through low block teams because it sort of baits their players onto your centre-backs. Really, really good, and you will see a difference with a player that brings the ball out of defence in terms of how good it is in your build-up play. It's really, really useful, and it adds a lot of value to your team. Also, different positions have different traits to be learnt. So, for example, now I'm on my winger, Martin Petkov. We also have things like likes to beat the offside trap. We also have dribbles with the ball through the centre of the pack if you're a winger, if you've got a guy that really you want him to drive inside. You've got things like moving to channels as a winger. As an attacking player, you have things like gets into opposition area whenever possible. You have things like arrive late into the opposition area when possible. You also have things like attempts first time shots as an attacker. And you can also make wingers cut inside from each side, so you can have someone that cuts inside from the right and cuts inside from the left, or just one. It's totally up to you. So different players have different positions, have different traits to be able to be learned. So some can't be learned in some positions, for example. If you want to see all the player traits in the game, or you want a player that already has a trait that you want to buy, all we have to do is go to the player search screen. We go to edit search, this little button here, then we go to general, player trait, and then you guys can see all the player traits. Now, there will be some on this list that you guys will notice that I might not have mentioned, like argues with officials, which is something that you can't give a player, but they might already have it, which is just going to lead to disciplinary things. It's a bit of a negative one. There's also looks for pass rather than attempting to score. If a guy hasn't really got good finishing or good long shots or is really good passing, you might want him to avoid shooting and give it to someone else who's better at shooting. That's really good. Tries first time shots can be really good for strikers with good decision making, anticipation and technique. If they shoot before the goalkeeper gets time to set, then it could be really good at scoring extra goals. Another one that could be really useful for you guys that want to do really high possession systems and you don't want anybody to play the ball long, you want to be playing like Pep's Barcelona or things like that, is tries to play a way out of trouble. For example, Frankie de Jong here has it, and it says, this increases the chances of a player looking to pass or dribble against pressure in defensive position, rather than opting for a safety-first approach of clearing the ball. So rather than people getting flustered and they want to kick the ball long or out of any sort of pressure they're under, instead they'll dribble or pass past it. It's really good if you guys don't want to see those long passes and you want to see your guys stick to your principles and just play out from the back. I'm pretty sure I've covered everything or almost everything in that video. If you have something that you want to ask me, guys, and I've not covered it, then just leave it in the comments down below and I will get back to every single one of you as always. Thank you everyone for the support on the channel recently. It's been fantastic. The subscriptions are flying in, so I really appreciate that. If you've not already hit the button, please hit it, and I'll catch you next time, guys. Goodbye.